They've been beaten. Not with fists, but with something else.
It was a horrible way to die.
Look at me. Look at me. Who did this to this elderly couple?
I did not want to kill, didn't think about killing nobody.
I don't know who did it. It wasn't me, though.
We weren't going to back down.
There's something more to this.
There was something going on there.
Someone put them up to this.
There's no doubt she would do this again. She needed to be stopped.
What happens if they don't pay you?
He has to pay me.
She's a mastermind of this process. Do not with us.
Y'all scared me. Oh, Mama. I want you.
They touched a nerve, and they know it.
Arlington 911. Hello? This is Arlington.
Yes, ma'am. My mother-in-law house, the window is open.
Okay, so you just found it open. Is your mother-in-law home?
I don't know because nobody picks up the phone.
And you don't know if they're hurt or not, correct?
I don't know, ma'am. I'm afraid.
So I got dispatched to a welfare check saying I can't get a hold of my mom and dad. When I got to the scene, an entire family was out there saying, please help, please help. The family had said that they tried the door and it was locked. So I made the decision to go in through the window. It's dark in there. I grab my flashlight and I'm calling out Arlington police, and there was no answer. There's no one in the immediate living room. There's no one in the little kitchenette area. The only thing that I haven't checked is a bedroom. I open the door and I see the bloody handprint, which led me to know that there was something in the closet that I didn't want to see. There was no preparing myself for what was in that closet. Just a bloody massacre.
Death is always ugly. Violent death is even more ugly. It is profoundly evil.
My name is Byron Stewart. I'm a detective with the Arlington Police Department. My major was good journalism, interview and interrogation, learning the art of the investigation. It's very important to handle high challenging cases. It was June 10th, 2012. I was at home. I was on call, and so therefore I had to respond.
At the crime scene, Stewart is informed by the uniformed officer what she has discovered in this apartment.
I was initially told that there was a couple found. These were elderly victims, Lone Win, and then Hung Lee.
Then Stewart goes inside to look at the bodies.
Right away, I could see that the apartment was in disarray. There were CDs thrown about, furniture was thrown about, but the amount of ransacking was just so random here and there that I had my reservations. Entering the bedroom area, it was a horrible scene. The victims are covered in massive amounts of duct tape. I could see that the duct tape was wrapped around their face, around their ankles, heavy duct tape around their hands. They were pretty much helpless.
I haven't seen that level of violence. This case was something that stayed with me for a long time.
That's the thing that's going through my mind. How horrible was it for them?
There appears to be blunt force trauma to the heads of both victims. They've been beaten, not with fists, but with something else.
They were fighting for their lives and ultimately succumbed to their injuries.
Then they discover that these killers have apparently spent time in this place.
I noticed that there was a table and it had a plate on it. And on that plate appeared to be a marijuana cigarette. And these pills that were crushed, what's actually happening?
It just didn't look right. There's something more to this.
One thing that we saw was a beer bottle that had a bandana around the bottle of the neck. That didn't make any sense. Then I had to look at the demographics of the victims, and they did not look to be the type of persons that would be smoking marijuana or drinking beer. They could be the suspects who stayed there while these victims were dying.
Could that be why they were shoved in a closet? Of course. Why look at this dead person while we're trying to have a good time?
Once I walked through the crime scene, I came back outside and the family was there. I did ask that they come back to the station so I can take an official statement from them.
So Stewart used to speak to the family member who called 911. His name is Chow Tran, and the dead people are the parents of his wife.
Chow's wife didn't speak that much English, and so Chow Tran quickly became the spokesperson for the family. They had already been told that their parents and loved ones were deceased, but they did not know the details.
Cho is your first name, right?
Yes.
And Cho, the way this works is, we have to figure out who would do this, and why they would do this.
The most important person in a homicide scene is the victim. Tell me about the victim.
He said they stayed to themselves. They were very family-oriented, and that they just did not partake in anything that would warrant that.
Any known enemies or anything like that?
I don't think my mom and dad have any,
Oh, yeah.
I met them in a Vietnamese community. They're very nice people. Everybody loved them. They would not hurt a little fly. Long and Ho came here, they worked hard.
They immigrated here from Vietnam in order to make a better life for themselves.
They established a sewing and garment business in Arlington, Texas. They hire Chow Tran, because he's a relative, to be the general manager.
My mom's the owner of the shop, and I go to the company, I get work.
They built this business up, and by all accounts, they were, the American dream.
Chow told me that they did specialized sewing for costumes and things of that nature that you would see in amusement parks.
Chow Tran goes on to report that they were able to achieve a contract with the Disney Corporation, and it's going along just fine. 2007, 2008 comes around, and there is a world recession. Disney cancels their contract, and now this family is all of a sudden in deep trouble.
Did they work yesterday at the shop?
No,
the shop was closed?
It's closed for a whole week. They've been so slow.
Okay.
This was an old school Vietnamese family. You or I might say, okay, we need to go and talk to a financial planner. For them, it was like, okay, we need to go talk to somebody to figure out how to get this curse taken off our family and our business.
He truly meant a curse in the spiritual sense of it, and he was looking for ways to try to lift this curse. There's a community that believes that that exists and that that can happen.
They even enlisted the aid of a spiritual advisor, but it didn't help.
During my conversation with Chow Tran, I tried to get as much information before the offense took place.
So Stewart asked the standard question of Chow Tran, when's the last time you saw your parents-in-law? Well, last night.
Chow said that it was his birthday. And so the victims were at Chow Tran's house before this offense took place, and they had dinner to celebrate that.
We eat, and when we sit together and we play cards until it's 10 o'clock.
When they came over, everybody was happy?
Oh, everybody's happy, and we joking around.
The story he told was this was just a normal night where we're getting together and having food, and then they went home.
Do you understand? You have to look at family members first and to see if anybody has some type of motive within the family. Okay. So no one would have a reason to want to harm them in your family at all.
What's harm me? And kill them?
Yeah, kill them.
Oh, no.
There was nothing that indicated that there was any kind of foul play from the family at all. After I talked to the child, I attended the autopsy to try to get some type of cause of death.
They inform him they did not find identifiable fingerprints, but with that much duct tape, it is unknown what lies beneath it.
I looked at both victims, and I could see they had blunt force trauma to the head. But according to the doctors, it's not the type of blows that would kill them.
What did cause death was asphyxia. 35 feet of duct tape had been used. That's an enormous amount of duct tape.
It was a horrible way to die, to be trying to gasp for air and you couldn't get it because this duct tape is blocking your airway. Then that got me thinking about the crime scene. One thing that we saw was a beer bottle that had a bandana around the neck. I was familiar with the blue bandana and thought, oh, maybe this is a gang member or something like that who left this.
There are gang activities where a calling card is left. The beer bottles are wrapped in light blue rags, a calling card of the gang.
There's an array of different cultures of gangs, Vietnamese gangs too as well. Gang members can do anything. Anything is unpredictable.
Could a Vietnamese street gang engage in violent death? Oh, without doubt, they can certainly do that. Do not with us, or this is going to happen to you, only maybe even worse. After the Nguyen's were found brutally murdered, Detective Stewart has to wonder, is this a street gang seeking a street cred?
This bandana was a light blue type color. And we did have a gang unit at the police department at the time, so they did give us a possible gang affiliated with that type of color.
So gangs certainly are involved in home invasion, robberies, burglaries, breaking into people's homes. I mean, they're not above any of that.
In Vietnam, there are gangs dating back thousands of years. But the modern Vietnamese gangs are just as violent.
In this area, Arlington, during the 80s and early 90s were the worst place for the Vietnamese gangster. There is a gang problem.
If it was a Vietnamese gang, they would probably know the culture of storing cash in the house and not having cash in banks.
Majority of the Vietnamese people don't trust the bank because banking system in Vietnam before the war, you put the money in there, if something happens, you have no money. That's why they come in here. They keep the cash in the house.
Byron was determined that he was going to solve this case. So he's going to have to talk to gang members.
What he needs is concrete physical evidence that would tie someone to this crime scene. That's when Stewart gets a break from the crime lab. They inform him they did not find identifiable fingerprints, but they found something even better. Whoever rolled the marijuana cigarette licked the paper so it would seal and left DNA behind.
The first thing they would do with the sample would be to run it through a database and see if it hits anybody.
In this particular case here, we did not get a DNA profile back on the person. It was disappointing.
The fact that the DNA profile is not attached to a name isn't that meaningful. Maybe he's never been arrested before.
We had no choice but to contact known gang members that we knew in the area. So we started talking to them. Some of them were uncooperative, didn't want to talk to us, took a lot of convincing.
Some gang member, they speak good English, but they play like I'm dumb, I don't know the language. They don't want to talk.
Some of these known gang members, they gave their DNA as a way of, you can check me, I have nothing to hide. We swabbed a lot of people. So all those samples were ran, and each one of them came back negative.
I think Byron had already sensed that the scene was staged. Those victims had no ties to any type of anything gang-related.
That bandana was meant to lead us to gang members or to start interviewing gang members, and it worked. We did. So then the question is, why would someone do that?
This is violent and very nasty. It is profoundly evil. So Stewart is wondering where he's going to go next when he gets a phone call from an insurance company who want to know what he knows about the death of these people.
The insurance company needs confirmation that the death actually occurred, the manner of the death, was it a suicide, was it a homicide?
Insurance companies are very thorough. They're not going to pay anybody, and they don't have to. So Stewart asked the insurance person, who's the beneficiary of the payout?
They told me that Chao Tran was a beneficiary. The insurance policy totaled around $1.8 million. This did catch my attention because of the amount of money.
$1.8 million is change your life money. Now that gives Stewart 1.8 million reasons to have a conversation with Mr. Tran. It's apparent to Stewart that there are a number of things Chao Tran never told him. Why, in heaven's name, would Nguyen's have a policy worth $1.8 million? So he needs to speak to Tran and see what's going on with him.
When Byron asked him about having life insurance taken out on the victims, I believe the explanation that was given was it was for the benefit of the business.
Chao assured me that the insurance policy was on the family because if something were to happen to the primary owners, which in this case it did, then they could carry on with the business.
This explanation is perfectly reasonable. These people have built this business from the ground up. To them, it is their legacy for their family, and they want to protect it.
Having insurance in and of itself is not a concern of mine, so that proved again to be a dead end.
Over the next few months, progress in the case comes to a stop. All leads have been exhausted.
And we kept waiting for a possible DNA profile. We just don't have the person that it belongs to. I truly wanted closure with this case. It was personal.
Yeah, it bothered him. No one wishes for that case to go cold. He did everything that he could. He was determined that he was going to solve this case.
I kept pictures of both victims on my desk as a reminder. I would get other cases, but this case still was that important for me that we got closure. We maintained contact with Chao and his family. We gave them updates. The insurance company had paid off on the policies. Something's got to give.
Nearly 3 years after the Nguyen's were found murdered and stuffed in a closet, Stewart gets a phone call.
I remember getting a call from one of my supervisors who said, "Hey, we got a DNA hit." And so I probably said some choice words as far as, "Are you sure you're reading what you have?" And that person assured me it was from a cigarette from a 2012 case.
That was the break that he was looking for.
We were back on track as if it happened yesterday.
Stewart inquires as to who this person is. It matches the DNA. He is a young man named Willie Guillory. He was arrested for stealing a horse, which in Texas is a felony.
And it's such a crazy way for the case to break, right? You know, the kid steals a horse and his DNA goes in the system.
Stewart has him transported by the PD in Houston 250 miles to the city of Arlington.
All right, well.
Willie was placed into an interview room, and I'm watching him, and he's really relaxed at the time.
Can you explain to me what's going on first?
Sure. I'm the detective here in Arlington. And can I make sure I have some of your information first?
I just kind of got a feel for who he was, and then I go into explaining our offense and what happened in 2012.
We were working on a homicide that occurred back in 2012. We're questioning you about it, Willie, because we believe that you were part of this offense. Do you understand what I'm saying? So tell us what happened.
I really do not know what happened because I have never been to Arlington at all.
And his body language changed. He's not as relaxed as he once was when we initially started talking. And I know I'm on the right track.
I'm telling you, your DNA was at the scene of this elderly couple back in 2012.
But
now let's try to figure out.
I don't know why y'all keep blaming me. I was 16.
Well, let's figure out first how your DNA got there.
I would never commit a murder, never will. I don't believe in killing people. I really don't believe in doing any of that.
He's very, very uncomfortable at this point, and he starts to get emotional.
Look at me, Willie. You need to feel comfortable telling us who did this offense.
I don't know who did it. It wasn't me, though. It just put a lot of stress on me.
They touched a nerve, and they know it. And they are on him like a new suit.
Y'all scared me.
He starts asking for his mother. He becomes almost a 15-year-old Willie now, but he's a grown man.
Papa, I want you.
Well, I need you to get up, man. Come on.
Those were real emotions of a person who's been caught.
I'm here with you, man, okay? I'm not going anywhere.
With Willie's demeanor and how he was acting, there's just no way in the world that I thought Willie, by himself, carried this out.
These bodies have been shoved into a closet. When someone is fighting for their life, one person alone is unlikely to be able to overcome that. There's more than one suspect in this event. There has to be.
The patience of Byron to get to this point, look, we know you didn't do this by yourself. Tell us who else was involved with this. And I think that's what gave Willie an out eventually.
During the course of talking to Willie, he does mention the name Bobby Guillory, which he says is his uncle.
Willie says he's afraid of Uncle Bobby.
He eventually says that Bobby was the ringleader of this offense that started a domino effect of everything.
Tell me more about Uncle Bobby, Willie. You seem to know a lot about him. DNA places Willie Guillory at the crime scene, and he places his Uncle Bobby there, too. It's enough to get a warrant to drag Bobby Guillory into an interrogation room.
I'd probably rehearsed that whole interview in my head for 2 hours. You know, I anticipated the first hour he was gonna deny. The second hour would be me confronting him with facts.
Okay, Bobby, now, of course, I need to explain to you everything that's going on, right?
Yes.
You still want to talk to me?
Yeah, talk to you.
Okay. Where we are right now and how we stand right now is this. Willie has been arrested and he's been charged with capital murder.
I hit Bobby with, are you going to truly let him take the whole rap for this?
I don't look at you as a monster. I look at you as a person who I believe you want to make amends. You're just scared.
At this point, he looked in my opinion, like a defeated man.
Now, I'm just asking you, Bobby, what's going through your mind as far as on Willie's behalf?
I knew that he was ready to tell the truth.
Now, just wanted Willie to come with me so we can find this money fast and go.
So Bobby says he heard the Nguyen family kept a lot of cash at home. You heard from who? And all of a sudden, the Nguyen's come home.
It was dark, and we started fighting, tussling, and stuff like that.
And the next thing you know, these people are dead. That does not equate to wrapping 35 feet of duct tape around their heads until they suffocate.
So what was the purpose behind the duct tape then, in your opinion?
Just to stop him from hollering.
It was clear what Bobby was telling Stewart was not everything. He still understood that he needed to downplay his role in this.
He drove from Houston to the Arlington area to commit this offense. Where's the connection?
Something's going on here. Someone put them up to this.
I believe there are other people involved. You have to decide, just like Willie had to decide, how much defense you're trying to do for them. Who benefited from these people's death?
He had to make a decision whether or not he wanted to tell the truth, and that was not happening at that time.
Bobby refuses to name any additional players. So Stewart turns his attention back to Willie.
Who are they, Willie? Who did this to the other?
I just heard about it. There was some other people.
Willie started opening up. He come to the point where he knew we had him.
Finally, he admits that they were doing it on behalf of a woman. What woman would that be?
I know it's hard, Willie, so just tell us.
Do you have a sheet of paper in the bed? That's all I know about it. Daphne.
Daphne? Okay. Okay, is Daphne one of the persons?
Daphne was the ringleader of it all.
He gave up this lady named Daphne. That doesn't mean anything to me at the time.
I don't think he knew all the intricate details of Daphne. So we came back to interview Bobby.
Okay, so Willie and I have talked very extensively on everything, okay? But I do know that Daphne started this process.
That's when he was like, you know what? If I'm going down, everybody's going down with me.
Well, Bobby, explain to me from the beginning how Daphne approached you and how the situation happened.
They knew her because she would go there to do her business for whatever business she was doing with the lady. You know, the witchcraft or whatever they do. You know, and the lady owed her a lot of money.
Okay.
Daphne said she wanted them dead because they owed her a lot of money, and she promised to pay them if they would kill them.
You got there. Did you use the key to get in?
Yeah.
Who can get you guys a key to that apartment?
Daphne.
Well, then one would have to say, how did Daphne get the keys?
From him.
Did she mention his name?
He says there's a Vietnamese guy that worked with them or something.
Chow Tran is the son-in-law.
He the one gave Daphne that key.
He did?
That's how she got it.
And that was this complete and utter shock. He lied to me, and that he broke that level of trust that we established in the beginning of me thinking that he and his family were victims in this.
So no one would have a reason to want to harm them in your family at all?
And kill them?
Yeah, kill them.
Oh, no.
Well, no. That, my boy, is very interesting. Bobby and Willie Guillory tell a very interesting story. A Vietnamese spiritual advisor named Daphne Wright asked them to kill Nguyen's with the assistance and help of the son-in-law, Chow Tran.
Here's a man that we've stopped by his house on a number of occasions, assured him that we were still working on this case. Now we learned that he had possible involvement in this. And I did make the decision to go by the home of Daphne Wright, but we also got a search warrant for her home. And we wanted to collect any evidence that we felt was relevant to the case.
One of the things Detective Stewart needs to prove is that Daphne Wright and Chow Tran actually know each other.
A portion of her home was an office for her clients to come and meet her.
There was something going on there that we wouldn't normally see in a person's house unless they're casting spells.
So we go in there and she have all these ledgers, all these names, how much money they owed her, how much money was given, if they still owed her.
Daphne's spiritual gift was being a priestess to the point where she can remove curses from your business. She kept books and records of all of her dealings with every person that she came in contact with.
Everything is right down to the details.
It was an elaborate scheme that she had going on.
And then they see it. There is a record of Chow Tran and his picture in her records.
I really wanted the opportunity to talk to Daphne to learn more about her ability to remove curses. But I also wanted to learn more about Chow and how this all came to be and what her role was in it.
Let me just ask you this, just to clarify what we talked about. You do know Chow Tran?
When we first moved in here, that's when he contacted me. For his visit, people come to me because they need help.
She's given us this talk about how she can remove a hex and how she can grow your business if your business is not doing well.
But if you are superstitious, you believe it to be true that the Daphne Wrights of the world are the only ones who can speak to the deities and influence the outcome of your life.
She's the one that benefited out throughout this whole process. Money is her motivating factor.
She charges enormous amounts of money for this, $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 a session.
That got me thinking about the conversation I had with Chow. And Chow saying that we felt our business was cursed.
Did he pay you?
He has to pay me.
Okay. What happens if they don't pay you?
Well, I can't even tell what's gonna happen. But usually it's not gonna be a nice thing to happen. I don't have to do anything to them. Things just happen on its own.
She told Byron, if people owe me money, I'm gonna get my money one way or another.
Give me money because I like money. And you're a dumb shit, so I'm gonna take yours first because you're just too easy.
We eventually made the decision to get an arrest warrant for Daphne. She was taken to jail at that time, and I attempted to interview her.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah, being able to see. Daphne, Detective Stewart, do you remember me?
Yeah.
Daphne Wright might appear to you to be just some suburban soccer mom. But when you look beyond the surface, she had her own little racket going on. If you didn't pay, you knew something bad was going to happen to you.
You can tell she was very angry at the time. She was defiant.
I'd like to know what's going on because the last time when you came down to see me, I didn't even know what is really going on back then.
I explained to her what the nature of the arrest was for.
If I have to make any statements or anything, I like to have my lawyer present before I do anything.
So now the spiritual advisor needs a legal advisor.
Come with me, ma'am.
Now he hopes to talk to Chow Tran, see if he can break him.
We're going to confront him about everything that we had learned thus far. But instead, I got a call from an attorney. And I knew where we were heading at that point.
So now they're out of business. They're not going to get a statement, and they need one. Daphne Wright is the mastermind of this process, the architect of the entire crime.
The case against Daphne was going to be, a very difficult case to prove. It's a completely circumstantial case. And the risks were high that Daphne could walk. And so the thought was, maybe if we subpoenaed Chow Tran and brought him in, then maybe we could somehow get him on the stand. In order to have Chow Tran testify against Daphne, we had to give him immunity.
It was a very hard decision. There's no doubt in our mind that she would do this again. She needed to be stopped, and if we had to use Chow for that matter, it's the lesser of two evils.
I spent a lot of hours at the police station with Stewart, combing over evidence and strategizing, all the way up to the start of Daphne's trial.
During the trial, Chow Tran says, over the course of a few years, the family had racked up a debt of $280,000.
And so Chow had to come up with some kind of way to pay this money.
Chow Tran has a marvelous idea. What about the life insurance?
Chow knew that there was an insurance policy that they had been paying on for years.
Both Chow and Wright determined that if they were dead, the insurance could pay the debt.
So now who are we going to get to commit the crime? Because Daphne wasn't going to do it. So she knew this guy, Bobby.
And what kind of situation is Bobby in? He's in the same situation that Chow's in. Financial problems.
She thought if she dangled $10,000 in front of him, he would do anything she wanted. So Bobby Guillory accepts the assignment, but he doesn't think he can handle two people. So he contacts his dim-witted nephew, and Willie's dumb enough to go along. Chow told Daphne the apartment would be empty until 10 p.m. and gave her the key. The night of the murder, Chow Tran lured his father-in-law, Nguyen, over to his house to celebrate his birthday. All part of the plan to give the Guillorys time to enter the apartment.
In that time frame, you have Willie and Bobby who just sits in this apartment. They were getting ready to attack him, and that's exactly what they did.
And when the Nguyen's came home, the Guillorys were ready, and the attack occurred.
And then they taped across their face and their mouth and eyes to the point where they couldn't breathe. They had to die because insurance won't pay to living people. Willie and Bobby start staging their apartment to look like it's been ransacked.
They staged the scene to make it look like it was a gang home invasion gone bad.
They might have gotten away with it until Willie made a fatal mistake.
Willie couldn't get the paper to stay together, so he licked it and transferred his DNA onto that cigarette. Had he not licked that cigarette, we would have never known who did this. The link that Chow Tran had gone, he knows that he needs his in-laws to come over to the house at a certain time, and he needs them to leave at a certain time. I often think, what is Chow thinking when he sees his in-laws leave the house, when he knows he's looking at them for the last time? I was on pins and needles with Daphne's trial. We just didn't know which way it was going to go. Didn't know how Chow's testimony was going to go.
At the end of the day, we convict Daphne Wright of capital murder. That sentence is automatic, life without parole. Willie and Bobby were both charged with capital murder. Willie, we made him an offer. Willie got 13 years on murder, and then Bobby got life without the possibility of parole. Chow's not getting any charges based on the evidence that we had. It still sits with me today as I'm sitting in this chair thinking about the fact that Chow Tran got away with murder. And that sort of sticks in my craw, and it probably always will.
December in Toronto has a way of making even the wealthiest streets feel lonely. The trees stand bare beneath a steel-colored sky. Expensive homes hide behind iron gates and carefully trimmed hedges now covered in a thin layer of winter frost. The city moves through another ordinary week before Christmas. Office towers glow against the early darkness. Families hurry through crowded shopping centers. Restaurant windows shine warmly onto frozen sidewalks. From the outside, everything appears normal. But sometimes the most disturbing mysteries begin in places where nothing seems out of place. Sometimes evil does not arrive with shattered glass, forced doors, or screams in the night. Sometimes it leaves almost no trace at all. On the morning of December 15, 2017, one of the most shocking and baffling criminal investigations in Canadian history was about to begin. It started with a house. A very large house. A mansion tucked away in one of Toronto's most affluent neighborhoods. The kind of property people slow down to admire when they drive past. The kind of home that symbolizes success, influence, and security. Behind its walls lived a couple who seemed to have achieved everything modern society tells us to strive for. Power. Respect. Wealth. A legacy that stretched across continents. Yet hidden somewhere inside that enormous residence was a secret that would soon capture the attention of investigators, journalists, private detectives, forensic experts, and millions of people around the world. Because the owners of that mansion were dead. Not from illness. Not from old age. And not in the peaceful manner one might expect for two people who had spent decades building an empire. They were found side by side. Motionless. Silent. Their bodies positioned in a way that would leave even experienced homicide investigators struggling to understand what they were looking at. The scene seemed to tell a story. But nobody could agree on what story it was trying to tell. Was it murder? Was it a murder-suicide? Was it a message? Was it a carefully staged deception? Or was it something even more sinister? Years later, those questions would remain unanswered. The mystery would only grow darker. Because the victims were not ordinary citizens. The man at the center of this story was one of the richest individuals in Canada. A self-made billionaire. A pharmaceutical titan. A man whose business decisions affected millions of lives. A man admired by some and fiercely disliked by others. His name was Barry Sherman. Beside him was the woman who had shared his life for decades. His partner. His confidant. His wife. Honey Sherman. Together they occupied a world most people only glimpse from a distance. Private jets. Luxury properties. High-profile charity events. Political connections. Corporate influence. Their names appeared in newspapers not because of scandal, but because of philanthropy. Hospitals, universities, cultural institutions, and community organizations benefited from their generosity. They attended galas. They supported causes. They represented a version of success that seemed almost untouchable. Yet on that cold December day, none of that mattered. Money could not protect them. Status could not protect them. Influence could not protect them. And as investigators would soon discover, wealth can sometimes create as many enemies as it creates opportunities. The discovery itself felt almost cinematic. A real estate agent arrived at the property. The mansion was being prepared for sale. The Shermans had recently purchased another home and were planning a move. It was supposed to be a routine visit. Another stop in a busy workday. Nothing unusual. Nothing alarming. No reason whatsoever to expect what waited inside. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Large houses often are. The kind of silence that seems natural at first. Then strange. Then unsettling. Room after room stood still. No conversation. No footsteps. No movement. Only the distant hum of a house continuing its daily functions. Heating systems. Electrical currents. The small mechanical sounds that remind us a building is alive even when the people inside are not. At some point, the silence became impossible to ignore. And then came the discovery. Deep inside the home, near the indoor pool area, the bodies of Barry and Honey Sherman. Dead. The shock must have been immediate. The kind of moment that fractures reality. A moment when the brain refuses to process what the eyes are seeing. For a few seconds, perhaps even longer, nothing makes sense. The world feels disconnected. Dreamlike. Impossible. Yet the horrifying truth remained. 2 billionaires. 2 philanthropists. A husband and wife. Dead inside their own mansion. As emergency responders arrived, the mystery deepened. The position of the bodies was unusual. Strikingly unusual. Investigators would spend years examining every detail of what they found that day. Every angle. Every object. Every movement that may have occurred inside the residence. Because the scene appeared almost staged. Not chaotic. Not random. Not like the aftermath of a violent struggle spilling through multiple rooms. Instead, there was an eerie sense of arrangement. A visual image that seemed designed to communicate something. But what? That question would haunt the investigation from the very beginning. Outside, news of the deaths spread rapidly. At first, details were scarce. People heard fragments. Rumors. Speculation. Whispers passed between journalists and law enforcement sources. A prominent businessman had died. His wife was also dead. The circumstances appeared suspicious. Soon the story exploded across Canada. Television networks interrupted regular programming. Newspapers rushed reporters to the scene. Photographers gathered beyond police barriers. Neighbors stared through windows. Friends reached for telephones. Family members tried desperately to understand what had happened. The reaction was immediate because Barry Sherman was not merely wealthy. He was famous. His company had transformed the pharmaceutical industry. His success had generated admiration and controversy in equal measure. Supporters viewed him as a visionary entrepreneur. Critics saw him as a ruthless competitor. Either way, almost everyone had an opinion. And now he was dead. As reporters began digging into the story, another uncomfortable reality emerged. People with immense wealth often accumulate complicated histories. Business rivalries. Legal battles. Personal conflicts. Financial disputes. Former associates. Disappointed partners. Competitors. Resentful acquaintances. The larger the empire, the longer the list of people connected to it. Investigators suddenly faced a daunting challenge. If this was murder, where should they begin? Should they look at business? Family? Personal relationships? Corporate enemies? Random violence? Professional assassins? Every possibility seemed plausible. Every possibility seemed impossible. And that contradiction would define the case. Because from the very beginning, almost nothing fit neatly together. The mansion showed no obvious signs of forced entry. There were no shattered windows. No kicked-in doors. No clear indication that a stranger had violently invaded the property. That single detail generated countless questions. Did the victims know their killer? Did they willingly let someone inside? Had the murderer entered unnoticed? Or had the killer already been there? The absence of simple answers transformed an already shocking homicide into something far more troubling. A puzzle. A labyrinth. A mystery that seemed to grow more complicated each time investigators thought they were making progress. Yet perhaps the most chilling aspect of the entire story was not what police found. It was what they did not find. No dramatic trail of evidence. No obvious forensic breakthrough. No clear suspect waiting in the shadows. Instead there was absence. Missing certainty. Missing explanations. Missing truth. The investigation would become one of the largest and most expensive homicide inquiries in modern Canadian history. Detectives would review surveillance footage, examine financial records, analyze forensic evidence, interview countless witnesses, follow lead after lead. And still the central mystery remained stubbornly intact. Who killed Barry and Honey Sherman? Why were they targeted? And how could a double homicide involving two of the most recognizable people in Canada occur without leaving behind a clear path to the perpetrator? Those questions remain alive today. Years have passed. Millions of dollars have been spent. Rewards have been offered. Private investigators have joined the search. Journalists have devoted entire books to the case. Experts have debated theories. Families have waited for answers. Yet somewhere within the shadows surrounding that winter night lies a truth that has never fully emerged. A truth known only to the person, or perhaps persons, responsible. Somewhere, someone knows exactly what happened inside that mansion. Someone knows how Barry Sherman spent his final hours. Someone knows what Honey Sherman experienced during her final moments. Someone knows why two lives ended in one of the most baffling criminal mysteries Canada has ever seen. And that is where our story begins. Not with certainty. Not with justice. Not with an arrest. But with questions. Questions hanging in the cold Toronto air like frozen breath on a December night. Questions that refuse to disappear. Questions that continue to echo through empty hallways, police files, newspaper archives, and the memories of those who knew the victims. Because before there can be answers, we must return to the beginning. Before the headlines. Before the speculation. Before the theories. Before the investigation consumed the nation. We must understand who Barry and Honey Sherman really were. How they built their lives. How they built their fortune. And how two people who appeared to have everything became the central figures in a mystery that remains unsolved to this day. Long before the headlines. Long before the police tape. Long before investigators began searching for answers inside a silent mansion, there was a story that looked remarkably different. It was a story about ambition. A story about perseverance. A story about two people who spent decades building a life that seemed almost impossible from the outside. To understand why the deaths of Barry and Honey Sherman shocked an entire nation, it is necessary to understand the world they inhabited before tragedy entered it. Toronto in the second half of the 20th century was a city transforming itself. Neighborhoods expanded. Businesses emerged. Immigrants arrived carrying dreams larger than their bank accounts. The city grew upward and outward at the same time, becoming one of North America's most important economic centers. For ambitious people willing to work relentlessly, opportunities existed everywhere. Barry Sherman was one of those people. Even as a young man, he possessed an intensity that many who knew him would later remember. He was not the loudest person in every room. He was not the kind of individual who relied on charm alone. His strength came from persistence. When others saw obstacles, he saw calculations. When others became discouraged, he looked for another route forward. People who crossed paths with him often noticed the same thing. His mind never seemed to stop moving. Ideas became plans. Plans became projects. Projects became businesses. And businesses became empires. The pharmaceutical industry was not an easy battlefield. Competition was fierce. Legal disputes were common. Success often depended upon navigating regulations, patents, lawsuits, and market pressures simultaneously. Yet Barry appeared comfortable in environments that overwhelmed many others. He understood risk. More importantly, he seemed willing to embrace it. As years passed, that willingness transformed into extraordinary success. His company grew. Then it grew again. And again. What began as an ambitious business eventually evolved into one of the largest pharmaceutical manufacturers in the world. The scale became difficult for ordinary people to comprehend. Factories. Research facilities. International operations. Thousands of employees. Billions of dollars. The company expanded far beyond anything its founder could have imagined during the earliest days. With growth came wealth. Then more wealth. The numbers attached to Barry Sherman eventually reached levels most people encounter only in magazines and financial reports. Yet wealth alone does not explain this story. Because beside Barry stood another crucial figure. A woman whose presence shaped both his private life and public identity. Honey Sherman. Friends often described her as energetic, social, and deeply involved in charitable causes. Where Barry frequently projected the image of a businessman focused on strategy and competition, Honey often appeared more outwardly connected to people. She moved comfortably through social circles. She organized events. She maintained relationships. She participated in philanthropic initiatives that touched countless lives. Together they formed a partnership that lasted decades. Like any marriage, there's undoubtedly contained private complexities invisible to outsiders. No relationship survives that long without disagreements, disappointments, and challenges. But from the public perspective, they appeared united. Two individuals who had built a family, accumulated extraordinary wealth, and reached a level of influence few people ever experience. As the years passed, their names became increasingly associated with philanthropy. Hospitals benefited from donations. Educational institutions received support. Medical research projects found funding. Community organizations gained resources. Their contributions extended across numerous causes. In public appearances, photographs often captured smiling faces beneath ballroom chandeliers. Black tie events. Fundraising dinners. Charity galas. The visual language of success surrounded them. Expensive suits. Elegant dresses. Camera flashes. Polished speeches. Yet beneath that polished surface existed a far more complicated reality. Success creates admiration. It also creates resentment. Every major achievement generates shadows. Competitors who lose. Rivals who feel wronged. Former partners who believe they deserved more. Business associates who carry grudges for years. The pharmaceutical industry in particular can produce intense conflicts. Patent disputes. Financial disagreements. Corporate battles worth millions. Sometimes billions. Barry Sherman became famous not only because of his success but because of his willingness to fight aggressively for his business interests. Courtrooms became familiar territory. Legal battles appeared regularly throughout his professional life. Supporters viewed this as determination. Critics viewed it differently. What nobody disputed was the scale of those conflicts. Over decades, they accumulated. Some ended quietly. Others became highly public. Together they created a network of relationships stretching across industries, governments, corporations, and legal systems. As investigators would later discover, that network made identifying potential enemies extraordinarily difficult. Because when a billionaire dies under suspicious circumstances, detectives cannot simply examine one or two relationships. They must examine hundreds, sometimes thousands. Every disagreement suddenly appears significant. Every lawsuit becomes relevant. Every conflict demands attention. But in the years before the murders, none of that seemed important. Life continued moving forward. Children grew up. Family milestones arrived. Business continued expanding. Public appearances continued. The Shermans occupied a rare position in society. They possessed resources that insulated them from many ordinary concerns. If something broke, it could be repaired. If a problem emerged, experts could be hired. If assistance was needed, help was available. To many observers, their future appeared secure, predictable, protected. Yet wealth often creates a strange illusion. From a distance, it looks like safety. In reality, it can attract attention from every direction. Some people seek friendship. Others seek opportunity. A few seek something darker. By 2017, Barry and Honey Sherman had spent decades living in a world where influence and money flowed constantly around them. Their schedules remained busy. Their commitments remained extensive. Their responsibilities stretched across multiple spheres of life: business, family, charity, social obligations, public appearances. The pace rarely slowed. And yet subtle changes were beginning to appear. One of the most significant involved their home. The mansion that would later become infamous was no longer intended to be their permanent residence. The property had been placed on the market. A decision that seemed entirely ordinary at the time. Families move. Successful people purchase new homes. Life evolves. Nothing about the decision appeared suspicious. The Shermans had acquired another residence and were preparing for a new chapter. Real estate agents entered and exited the property. Showings were scheduled. Potential buyers expressed interest. The process moved forward as expected. No one imagined that the house itself would soon become known worldwide for reasons entirely unrelated to real estate. During those final months, the rhythm of life appeared normal. Friends communicated with the couple. Family members made plans. Future events occupied conversations. There were no obvious signs that catastrophe was approaching. No dramatic warnings. No public threats. No indication that the countdown toward one of Canada's most famous unsolved murders had already begun. This is often what makes true crime so unsettling. The future announces itself only after it arrives. Looking backward, people search desperately for clues. A strange conversation. An unusual behavior. A missed phone call. A forgotten detail. Something that might explain what happened. But at the time, those details rarely seem important. They blend into ordinary life. Only later do they become pieces of a puzzle. And so December arrived. Cold winds swept through Toronto streets. Holiday decorations appeared across neighborhoods. Storefronts glowed against early evening darkness. Families prepared for Christmas gatherings. Office parties filled restaurant reservations. The city moved toward celebration. Meanwhile, inside the world of Barry and Honey Sherman, everything appeared business as usual. The couple remained active, engaged, connected. Their calendar still contained future commitments, future meetings, future conversations, future plans. The word future itself still felt certain. Yet unknown to everyone around them, time was running out. Somewhere beyond public view, events were already moving toward a destination no one could yet see. Whether those events involved a stranger, a professional killer, a personal enemy, or someone entirely unexpected remains one of the central mysteries of this case. What we know is that the stage was set. The city was covered in winter. The mansion stood waiting. The victims continued living their lives. And somewhere, perhaps, another person was making preparations of their own. Someone whose identity remains hidden nearly a decade later. Someone whose actions would transform a successful couple's final chapter into a mystery that still haunts investigators today. At the center of that mystery stood two lives that seemed untouchable from the outside. A billionaire businessman. A devoted wife and philanthropist. A family surrounded by success. A future filled with plans. And a quiet Toronto mansion that would soon become the scene of an event so shocking, so strange, and so difficult to explain that years later the world would still be asking the same question. What really happened to Barry and Honey Sherman? Every murder investigation begins with a question. Who wanted the victim dead? But before detectives can answer that question, they must first answer another one. Who was the victim while they were alive? Not the name in a newspaper headline. Not the face shown on television. Not the photograph placed beside a breaking news banner. The real person. The complicated human being who existed before becoming part of a criminal investigation. Because every victim leaves behind more than a body. They leave behind routines, relationships, dreams, arguments, memories. And in the case of Barry and Honey Sherman, they left behind an entire world. To the public, Barry Sherman was often viewed through the lens of business. A billionaire. A pharmaceutical executive. A corporate giant. The founder of a company that had become one of the largest producers of generic medications in the world. Numbers followed him everywhere. Revenue figures. Market valuations. Legal settlements. Corporate growth. His professional life generated headlines long before his death ever did. Yet people who spend decades building businesses rarely think of themselves as headlines. Most think of themselves as workers. Problem solvers. Competitors. Builders. People with objectives that need to be completed before the next morning. Barry appeared to belong to that category. Even after accumulating extraordinary wealth, he maintained a reputation for relentless focus. The image often described by those who knew him was not a man lounging beside luxury pools or spending afternoons celebrating success. It was a man constantly occupied, constantly planning, constantly moving from one challenge to the next. His life had become a cycle of decisions, meetings, negotiations, strategies, deadlines, victories, setbacks, then another cycle, and another, and another. Success had not slowed him down. If anything, it seemed to accelerate him. People sometimes imagine billionaires as individuals who eventually stop striving because they have already achieved everything. Reality is often different. For certain personalities, achievement becomes addictive. Each success creates another objective. Each victory creates another mountain to climb. Barry Sherman appeared to be one of those people. His empire did not emerge overnight. It was built over decades. Years filled with risk and uncertainty. Years in which failure remained a possibility. Those early struggles shaped him. By the time wealth arrived, the habits responsible for creating that wealth were already deeply ingrained. Determination. Persistence. Competitiveness. The ability to endure pressure. The willingness to engage in conflict when necessary. These characteristics helped him build a fortune. They also helped create a long list of rivals. Because every successful entrepreneur leaves footprints across other people's ambitions. When one company wins, another loses. When one lawsuit succeeds, another party pays the price. When one deal is completed, someone else walks away disappointed. Over the course of decades, Barry Sherman accumulated both admirers and critics. That reality would later become enormously important. But inside the walls of his home, another side of life existed. The role of husband. The role of father. The role of family patriarch. Those roles belonged to a different world than corporate boardrooms. A world where conversations revolved around children, holidays, birthdays, future plans, and personal relationships. At the center of that world stood Honey Sherman. Where Barry's public image often revolved around business achievements, Honey's identity appeared more deeply connected to people. She was known for her involvement in charitable activities and social causes. Events. Fundraisers. Community initiatives. Relationships cultivated over years. The circles she moved through were often filled with educators, medical professionals, artists, community leaders, and philanthropists. She understood something many wealthy individuals eventually discover. Money can build buildings. Money can fund research. Money can purchase influence. But meaningful impact often depends on relationships. Honey seemed comfortable in those spaces. Comfortable bringing people together. Comfortable supporting causes she believed mattered. Comfortable serving as a bridge between wealth and community. Photographs from public events frequently captured her smiling beside friends and supporters. The images portrayed confidence, energy, engagement. The appearance of someone actively participating in the world around her. Like every public image, however, it revealed only part of the story. No marriage spanning decades is simple. No family becomes wealthy without encountering challenges. No life remains untouched by stress, disagreements, or disappointment. The Shermans were human beings before they were public figures. That humanity often disappears beneath headlines. Yet it matters. Because victims are not characters created for a mystery. They are people whose lives continue affecting others long after death. Barry and Honey had children. A family network extending beyond business and philanthropy. Children who grew up watching their parents navigate extraordinary success. Children who would eventually receive the phone calls that no son or daughter should ever receive. The phone calls that split life into two chapters. Before and after. Before December 2017. And everything that followed. Long before those devastating moments arrived, family life continued much as it does for countless households. Gatherings. Celebrations. Shared memories. Conversations that seemed ordinary at the time. Nobody knows which conversation becomes the final one. Nobody knows which hug becomes the last. Nobody recognizes the final normal day while it is happening. That truth becomes painfully clear only afterward. For the Sherman family, countless memories suddenly acquired new significance after the murders. A dinner. A message. A holiday plan. A routine interaction. Moments once forgotten became priceless. Because they belonged to a world that no longer existed. As investigators later searched for answers, they discovered something common in many high-profile homicide cases. The public often sees victims differently than the people who knew them personally. To strangers, Barry Sherman represented corporate success. To family members, he represented something far more intimate. A father. A husband. A relative. A familiar voice. A familiar face. The same was true of Honey. The public saw philanthropy and social influence. Family members saw birthdays, conversations, traditions, and shared experiences. Those personal dimensions often disappear beneath the weight of sensational crime coverage. Yet they remain essential. Without them, victims become statistics. And Barry and Honey Sherman were never statistics. They were individuals whose lives touched thousands of people in different ways. Employees depended on companies they helped build. Charitable organizations benefited from their support. Friends relied on their presence. Family members loved them. The ripple effects extended outward for decades. By 2017, those ripples had spread across countless lives. Perhaps that is one reason their deaths generated such extraordinary attention. Not simply because they were wealthy. Not simply because the crime was mysterious. But because so many people felt connected to them. Some personally. Others indirectly. Many through institutions their generosity had helped sustain. When news of their deaths emerged, reactions arrived from every direction. Shock. Disbelief. Confusion. Sadness. The emotional response reflected the scale of their influence. People struggled to reconcile the image they knew with the circumstances being reported. Murder belonged to another world. A darker world. A world seemingly distant from charity galas and corporate success. Yet reality rarely respects such boundaries. Violence can enter any neighborhood, any home, any family. And when it does, wealth often proves powerless against it. In hindsight, one detail feels especially haunting. Both Barry and Honey were still actively engaged in life. Neither appeared to be retreating from the future. Their schedules contained plans, responsibilities, commitments, expectations. There were meetings yet to occur, events yet to attend, conversations yet to happen. Like all of us, they lived with the unspoken assumption that tomorrow would arrive. Most people do. The assumption is so natural we rarely notice it. We make plans for next week, next month, next year. We purchase tickets, schedule appointments, arrange holidays, promise future visits. Life becomes a collection of tomorrows. Then suddenly, for reasons beyond anyone's control, those tomorrows disappear. That is what happened to Barry and Honey Sherman. At some point during the final days of their lives, the future they expected quietly ended. The precise sequence of events remains unknown. The identity of the person responsible remains unknown. The motive remains unknown. But the human loss is undeniable. 2 lives ended. A family was shattered. A mystery was born. And behind every theory that would later dominate news coverage stands a simpler truth. Before they became victims, Barry and Honey Sherman were people. They built careers, raised a family, created friendships, accumulated memories, experienced successes and failures, laughed, argued, dreamed, planned, loved. The mansion where they died would eventually become the focus of endless speculation. But before it became a crime scene, it was a home. A place where ordinary moments unfolded despite extraordinary wealth. A place where family members visited. Where conversations happened. Where future plans were discussed. A place that represented safety. Or at least appeared to. And perhaps that is what makes this story so unsettling. Because when people think of danger, they often imagine unfamiliar places. Dark alleys. Abandoned buildings. Isolated roads. They do not imagine sprawling mansions in prestigious neighborhoods. They do not imagine billionaires sitting down to another ordinary evening. They do not imagine a husband and wife approaching the end of a normal day without realizing it will be their last. Yet that is exactly where this story leads. Toward a winter evening in Toronto. Toward a house growing quieter with each passing hour. Toward a mystery that would soon consume investigators. And toward the final chapter in the lives of Barry and Honey Sherman, a chapter neither of them could possibly have known was already beginning to unfold. The final hours of Barry and Honey Sherman remain hidden behind a wall of unanswered questions. No witness has stepped forward to describe exactly what happened. No confession has emerged. No courtroom testimony has reconstructed the sequence of events. The truth exists somewhere in the darkness between the last confirmed sightings of the couple and the moment their bodies were discovered. It is a span of time measured in hours. Yet those hours have remained frustratingly inaccessible for years. Investigators would spend countless days attempting to illuminate that darkness. They would analyze schedules, review surveillance footage, examine phone records, and reconstruct movements. Still, significant pieces of the puzzle remain missing. And it is inside that uncertainty that the most haunting part of the story unfolds. December 2017 was moving toward Christmas. Toronto was wrapped in winter. The city carried the familiar rhythm of the holiday season. Office workers hurried home before snowfall. Families prepared gatherings. Store windows glowed against early evening darkness. Cars moved through streets decorated with lights. The world outside continued following its ordinary routines. Inside the Sherman household, life also appeared ordinary. At least on the surface. The couple had plans. Responsibilities. Appointments. Future commitments. Nothing publicly suggested that danger was approaching. Nothing suggested that their names would soon dominate international headlines. As evenings settled over Toronto, temperatures dropped. The city lights reflected against cold pavement. Inside homes across the city, people sat down for dinner, watched television, answered messages, and prepared for the following day. Somewhere among those countless ordinary evenings was the final evening of Barry and Honey Sherman. Nobody knew it at the time. Not their friends. Not their relatives. Not their colleagues. Not even the victims themselves. That is one of the cruelest realities of violent crime. Life often ends in the middle of ordinary plans. The future remains intact right until the moment it disappears. For investigators, establishing a timeline became one of the most important challenges. Every movement mattered. Every interaction mattered. Every minute mattered. What was the couple doing during their final hours? Who spoke with them? Who saw them? Who knew where they would be? Who knew they would be alone? Questions multiplied rapidly. Unfortunately, answers arrived much more slowly. At some point during that critical period, something changed inside the mansion. Something interrupted the normal flow of events. Whether that interruption arrived through the front door, through an existing relationship, or through circumstances still unknown, remains one of the central mysteries of the case. What investigators would eventually conclude is that the deaths were not accidental. They were not natural. They were not the result of a spontaneous tragedy. Someone had intentionally taken 2 lives. That realization transformed everything. The image many people hold of homicide often comes from movies. Violent confrontations, shouted threats, explosive struggles, broken furniture, visible chaos. Reality can be very different. Some murders unfold quietly, almost invisibly. A few minutes, a few actions, then silence. The Sherman case appeared to belong to that category. When detectives later examined the residence, they found remarkably little evidence of a violent invasion. The house itself seemed strangely undisturbed. Rooms remained largely intact. Objects appeared in place. The absence of obvious destruction created immediate questions. How had the killer gained access? Had the victims willingly opened the door? Did they know the person responsible? Or had the murderer found another way inside? Each possibility carried disturbing implications. If the victims knew their killer, the suspect pool expanded dramatically. Friends, business associates, employees, acquaintances, family connections, professional contacts. The list could become enormous. If the killer was a stranger, another challenge emerged. How had a stranger entered one of the most expensive homes in Toronto without drawing attention? How had that person moved through the property without leaving behind a clear trail? The deeper investigators looked, the stranger the situation appeared. The house itself seemed almost frozen in time. A snapshot of life interrupted. Somewhere within those walls, the final moments unfolded. Moments nobody witnessed. Moments known only to the victims and their killer. Perhaps there was conversation. Perhaps there was deception. Perhaps there was fear. Perhaps there was confusion. Nobody knows. What is known is the outcome. Barry Sherman died. Honey Sherman died. Both deaths resulted from ligature neck compression. In simple terms, they were strangled. The brutality of that fact contrasts sharply with the wealth and prestige surrounding the victims. Strangulation is an intensely personal method of killing. Unlike a distant weapon, it requires close physical proximity. It requires control, time, direct contact. That reality would become significant as investigators attempted to understand the mindset of the perpetrator. Because methods matter. The way a crime is committed sometimes reveals insights about motive, planning, and emotional state. Yet even here, certainty remained elusive. The crime scene seemed to communicate something. The positioning of the bodies immediately attracted attention. Barry and Honey were discovered seated near the indoor pool area, positioned beside a railing. The arrangement appeared unusual, almost theatrical, as though someone had carefully considered how the scene would be found. Experienced investigators know that crime scenes can lie. Murderers sometimes stage environments to create false narratives. A suicide made to look like murder. A murder made to look like suicide. An accident made to appear intentional. A scene designed to confuse. A scene designed to delay. A scene designed to send a message. The Sherman crime scene raised precisely those concerns. What was genuine? What had been altered? What was investigators' interpretation, and what was objective fact? Those questions emerged almost immediately. Unfortunately, they would remain unresolved for years. Meanwhile, somewhere outside the mansion, life continued. People drove to work. Children attended school. Businesses opened their doors. Toronto moved through another winter day unaware that one of the most notorious homicide investigations in Canadian history was already underway behind closed doors. The victims remained undiscovered. The house remained quiet. Hours passed. Then more hours. The silence stretched. Every passing minute widened the gap between the crime itself and the eventual discovery. That gap mattered enormously. Time affects evidence. Memories. Witness accounts. Surveillance opportunities. Investigative momentum. The longer a crime remains hidden, the more opportunities exist for crucial details to disappear. Yet at the time, nobody knew a crime had occurred. The mansion simply stood there. Large. Silent. Sealed behind wealth and privacy. Eventually concern began to emerge. Attempts to contact the couple produced no response. Messages went unanswered. Communication patterns changed. Small details that seemed insignificant individually slowly accumulated into something more troubling. In hindsight, many homicide investigations contain similar moments. Tiny signals. Subtle deviations from routine. The first hints that something is wrong. Yet those hints rarely make sense until after the truth becomes known. For Barry and Honey Sherman, that truth remained hidden inside their own home. Waiting. As investigators would later discover, the crime possessed characteristics that suggested planning. This did not appear to be a random act committed in panic. The absence of obvious evidence. The unusual scene. The lack of forced entry. Together these elements hinted at deliberation. But planning raises its own questions. Who plans a double homicide against one of Canada's wealthiest couples? Why? How long had preparations been underway? Days? Weeks? Months? The answers remained elusive. The mystery deepened further because successful murders are surprisingly rare. Most killers make mistakes. They leave fingerprints. DNA. Witnesses. Digital records. Financial trails. Cell phone data. Something. Human beings are imperfect. Even intelligent criminals often overlook critical details. Yet in this case, investigators struggled to identify the kind of breakthrough that typically drives a major homicide investigation forward. The absence became its own clue. A killer who leaves almost nothing behind is often either extraordinarily lucky or extraordinarily careful. Neither possibility comforted investigators. By the time the bodies would finally be discovered, the crime had already begun evolving into something larger than a standard homicide investigation. The victim profile guaranteed attention. The circumstances guaranteed speculation. The unanswered questions guaranteed public fascination. Journalists would eventually examine every aspect of the couple's lives. Business relationships. Legal disputes. Family dynamics. Financial matters. Personal histories. The search for motive expanded in every direction simultaneously. Yet all of that remained in the future. At the center of the story stood a simpler reality. 2 people were dead. Their final hours had vanished into mystery. And somewhere beyond the walls of the mansion, the individual responsible was still free. Perhaps watching news reports. Perhaps monitoring the investigation. Perhaps feeling confident. Perhaps feeling afraid. Nobody knows. That uncertainty remains one of the most unsettling aspects of the Sherman case. Most true crime stories eventually arrive at a point where questions begin receiving answers. Suspects emerge. Evidence accumulates. The narrative narrows. This case moved in the opposite direction. The more investigators learned, the larger the mystery sometimes appeared. And it all began during those final hours. Those unseen moments. Those missing pieces. Those fragments of truth still hidden somewhere behind nearly a decade of speculation. Because before detectives examined evidence, before reporters filled newspapers with theories, before the public became obsessed with the mystery, there was simply a husband and wife spending what appeared to be another ordinary day. Then something happened. Something irreversible. Something that transformed a successful couple into victims. Something that turned a mansion into a crime scene. Something that launched one of the most baffling murder investigations in modern Canadian history. And when the silence inside that house was finally broken, the discovery waiting beyond it would leave investigators facing a question they still have not fully answered. Who entered the Sherman home that winter night, and how did they vanish without leaving the truth behind? The discovery of a murder scene often creates two separate realities. The first belongs to the people who find it. The second belongs to the investigators who must explain it. For the person who makes the discovery, the moment arrives like a collision. 1 second life feels ordinary. The next second nothing is ordinary anymore. For detectives, however, the process is different. They arrive after the shock, after the panic, after the emergency calls. Their responsibility is not to react emotionally. Their responsibility is to listen. Not to witnesses, not to rumors, but to the scene itself. Because every crime scene tells a story. The challenge is determining whether that story is true. On December 15, 2017, the Sherman Mansion became the center of one of the most perplexing crime scenes Canadian investigators had encountered in decades. The discovery occurred during what should have been a routine visit. The property was listed for sale. Real estate activity had become part of the home's normal rhythm. Agents entered and exited. Potential buyers viewed rooms. Appointments were scheduled. The mansion had become less of a private residence and more of a property waiting for its next chapter. Nothing about that process suggested danger. Nothing suggested tragedy. Yet hidden inside the house was a reality no one expected. As the individual moving through the property continued deeper into the residence, the atmosphere slowly changed. Large houses possess a unique kind of silence. They are designed to feel spacious, open, comfortable. But when nobody is present, that same spaciousness can feel strangely unsettling. Hallways seem longer. Rooms seem colder. The absence of human activity becomes impossible to ignore. The Sherman residence was enormous. Thousands of square feet spread across multiple levels. Luxury at every turn. Expensive finishes. Carefully designed spaces. The kind of home most people only glimpse in architectural magazines. Yet on that day, none of those details mattered. The house had become something else. A place holding a terrible secret. Then came the moment that changed everything. The indoor pool area. A section of the mansion associated with leisure and relaxation. A place intended for recreation, exercise, family enjoyment. Instead it became the location where two bodies were found. Barry Sherman. Honey Sherman. Motionless. Seated near the poolside railing. Dead. Even years later, investigators and journalists continue discussing the visual impact of that scene. Not because of graphic violence, but because of how unusual it appeared. Experienced police officers develop expectations about homicide scenes. Certain patterns appear repeatedly. Certain details feel familiar. The Sherman case immediately challenged those expectations. The positioning of the bodies was unlike what many investigators typically encountered. At first glance, the arrangement seemed almost deliberate. Almost symbolic. The victims appeared seated. Their bodies positioned near a railing surrounding the pool area. Ligatures were around their necks. The image created confusion before it created clarity. What exactly had happened here? That question emerged almost instantly. As emergency personnel secured the scene and investigators began arriving, another reality became clear. This would not be a straightforward case. Every experienced detective understands the importance of first impressions. Not because first impressions are always correct. Often they are not. But because initial observations shape the early direction of an investigation. The Sherman scene generated competing interpretations from the beginning. Some observers looked at the positioning and wondered whether the deaths involved a murder-suicide scenario. Others immediately suspected staging. Others remained uncertain. The crime scene seemed to resist easy explanation. And that resistance would become one of the defining features of the case. As police expanded their examination, they searched for indicators that typically accompany violent crimes. Forced entry. Broken locks. Damaged windows. Signs of struggle. Disorder. Evidence suggesting a chaotic confrontation. Instead, they encountered something far more puzzling. The house appeared largely intact. There were no obvious indications that an intruder had violently forced entry. This detail immediately elevated the complexity of the investigation. A forced entry creates a narrative. Someone wanted access and used violence to obtain it. No forced entry creates uncertainty. Did the victims know their killer? Did they willingly allow someone inside? Did the killer possess access already? Did another route exist? Every answer generated additional questions. The mansion itself became an enormous puzzle. Its size complicated everything. Large residences provide numerous opportunities for movement. Multiple entrances. Multiple exits. Areas concealed from casual observation. Potential blind spots. Investigators now faced the difficult task of determining not only what happened, but how someone may have moved through such a large property without attracting attention. Meanwhile, news of the deaths spread rapidly. The identities of the victims guaranteed public interest. A billionaire pharmaceutical executive and his wife found dead inside their mansion. The headline alone was enough to dominate national coverage. Television crews arrived. Reporters gathered. Photographers waited beyond police barriers. Neighbors watched from a distance. Questions multiplied faster than answers. Inside the investigation, however, detectives focused on evidence. Or more specifically, the surprising lack of it. Many homicide investigations begin with an abundance of clues. Fingerprints, DNA, witnesses, digital records, clear timelines, visible signs of confrontation. The Sherman case offered far less. That absence quickly became one of the most troubling aspects of the crime. The killer appeared to have left remarkably little behind. No obvious forensic breakthrough emerged immediately. No clear trail pointed investigators toward a suspect. Instead, they encountered ambiguity. A dangerous word in criminal investigations. Ambiguity creates space for mistakes. Space for assumptions. Space for incorrect theories. The scene needed to be understood carefully. Every object mattered. Every surface mattered. Every inch of the property required examination. Crime scene technicians documented everything. Photographs. Measurements. Physical evidence. Environmental details. Nothing could be overlooked. Because when a case lacks obvious clues, small details often become crucial. A misplaced object. A partial print. A forgotten trace. The difference between success and failure sometimes depends upon evidence so small it can fit beneath a fingernail. Yet as the investigation progressed, certainty remained elusive. Then came another challenge. Public perception. High-profile cases create enormous pressure. The public wants answers. The media wants updates. Families want justice. Political leaders want reassurance. All of that pressure arrives long before investigators possess complete information. The Sherman case generated extraordinary attention almost immediately. Speculation filled television broadcasts. Newspaper columns. Online discussions. Everyone seemed to have a theory. Business enemies. Personal vendettas. Professional assassins. Family disputes. Random violence. Theories emerged from every direction. The problem was that theories are not evidence. Detectives still needed facts. And facts remained frustratingly limited. One of the most controversial developments involved early interpretations of the deaths. Information leaked. Questions surfaced. Some initial discussions suggested the possibility of a murder-suicide. The reaction from family members was swift and emotional. They strongly rejected that idea. To them, the theory made no sense. It contradicted their understanding of the victims. It contradicted their experiences with Barry and Honey. As independent experts became involved and additional analysis occurred, the investigation gradually shifted. The evidence increasingly pointed away from murder-suicide and toward a different conclusion. A targeted double homicide. That shift changed everything. Instead of asking whether one spouse had killed the other, investigators now confronted a far more troubling possibility. Someone had entered the Shermans' world. Someone had murdered both victims. Someone had escaped. The focus now turned toward identifying that person. Yet the crime scene continued presenting obstacles. No forced entry. Minimal physical evidence. No immediate suspect. No clear motive. The combination was extraordinarily rare. Most homicide cases contain at least one strong starting point. This case seemed determined to provide none. Then came one of the most discussed elements of the investigation. Surveillance footage. Somewhere near the relevant time period, a camera captured an unidentified individual walking in the vicinity of the Sherman residence. The figure became known publicly as a person of interest. Not because investigators could definitively connect the individual to the murders, but because the timing and location appeared significant enough to warrant attention. The image itself only deepened the mystery. The figure remained unidentified. A shadow moving through a winter landscape. A person whose identity continues to generate questions years later. Was this individual the killer? A witness? An unrelated pedestrian? The answer remains unknown. But the footage demonstrated a larger truth. Even in an era filled with cameras, technology cannot always provide certainty. Sometimes it merely creates another mystery. As detectives continued processing the scene, a realization slowly emerged. This case possessed all the ingredients necessary to become a long-term investigation. The victims were prominent. The evidence was limited. The motive was unclear. The circumstances were unusual. Every factor pointed toward complexity. For the Sherman family, however, complexity offered little comfort. Behind every forensic question stood a personal tragedy. Parents lost. Relatives grieving. Friends searching for explanations. No amount of investigative sophistication could erase that reality. The people who loved Barry and Honey faced a painful truth. The last chapter of their lives had become a public mystery. And nobody could yet explain how it happened. As days turned into weeks, the mansion remained frozen in public imagination. Photographs of the residence appeared repeatedly in news coverage. The building became a symbol. Not of wealth. Not of success. But of unanswered questions. Somewhere inside those walls, the truth had existed. Somewhere inside those rooms, events unfolded exactly as they happened. The victims knew. The killer knew. Everyone else was left searching. Searching through evidence. Searching through timelines. Searching through memories. Searching through possibilities. The investigation had only just begun. Yet already one conclusion seemed unavoidable. This was not going to be a case solved quickly. The crime scene had revealed enough to confirm murder. But not enough to reveal the murderer. And that distinction would haunt investigators for years to come. Because while the discovery answered one question, it created 100 more. Barry and Honey Sherman were dead. That fact was undeniable. Everything else remained buried beneath uncertainty. Waiting for someone to uncover the truth hidden inside one of Canada's most enduring criminal mysteries. Every unsolved murder eventually reaches a dangerous stage. The evidence has been collected. The crime scene has been processed. Witnesses have been interviewed. The initial shock has faded. What remains is uncertainty. And uncertainty has a way of creating stories. Some are reasonable. Some are absurd. Some contain fragments of truth. Others lead investigators miles away from reality. The deaths of Barry and Honey Sherman entered that stage almost immediately. The victims were too famous. The circumstances were too strange. The unanswered questions were too numerous. Within weeks, theories began spreading far beyond police headquarters. Journalists developed their own interpretations. Former associates offered opinions. Armchair detectives searched for clues. Online discussions multiplied. The public wanted an explanation. Any explanation. The problem was that every possible answer seemed to create new problems. Detectives found themselves standing at the center of a maze. Every path appeared promising at first. Almost every path ended in a dead end. The investigation expanded rapidly. When two ordinary citizens are murdered, detectives focus on family, friends, co-workers, and local contacts. When a billionaire is murdered, the universe of possibilities becomes exponentially larger. Business associates, competitors, former employees, litigation opponents, financial rivals, professional acquaintances, personal relationships, family members. The list stretched outward in every direction. Each category contained people who needed to be examined. Each category contained potential motives. Each category contained unanswered questions. One of the earliest areas of focus involved Barry Sherman's business history. For decades he had operated inside one of the most competitive industries in the world. The pharmaceutical business can generate extraordinary profits. It can also generate extraordinary hostility. Companies battle over patents, contracts, market access, regulatory decisions, legal judgments. A single dispute can involve millions of dollars, sometimes billions. Over the course of his career, Barry Sherman had participated in numerous legal conflicts. Some were routine business matters. Others became intense and highly public. Investigators naturally asked whether one of those conflicts had evolved into something more dangerous. Had an old enemy finally decided revenge was worth the risk? Had a professional dispute become personal? Had someone harbored resentment for years? These questions could not be ignored. Detectives began examining a vast network of relationships accumulated over decades. The challenge was obvious. Successful people interact with enormous numbers of individuals. Thousands of employees. Hundreds of business contacts. Numerous competitors. Countless professional relationships. Within that crowd, identifying a genuine threat becomes extraordinarily difficult. Most disagreements never become violence. Most enemies remain verbal enemies. The investigation needed evidence, not suspicion. Evidence proved harder to find. As business-related theories circulated publicly, another possibility attracted attention. The family itself. This is one of the most uncomfortable realities in homicide investigations. Statistics often force detectives to examine those closest to the victim. Not because family members are automatically guilty, but because proximity matters. Access matters. Knowledge matters. People close to victims often know routines, schedules, habits, and vulnerabilities. Investigators therefore examined family relationships with the same rigor applied to every other avenue. The scrutiny created painful consequences. Families already grieving suddenly found themselves surrounded by public speculation. Newspapers analyzed personal histories. Commentators debated motives. Rumors spread. The emotional burden became immense. Yet detectives could not afford emotional shortcuts. Every possibility required examination. No matter how uncomfortable. No matter how unpopular. No matter how painful. Still, despite extensive inquiry, no definitive evidence emerged identifying a family member as responsible. Questions remained. Proof did not. The investigation continued. Then there was another category. The possibility of a professional killer. This theory fascinated the public for a simple reason. Certain aspects of the crime seemed unusually controlled. The absence of obvious evidence. The lack of forced entry. The ability to disappear afterward. These characteristics led some observers to wonder whether the perpetrator possessed specialized skills. Perhaps someone had been hired. Perhaps the murders were planned long in advance. Perhaps the killer approached the task with professional discipline. The idea carried undeniable dramatic appeal. It felt like something from a crime novel. A wealthy target. A carefully executed operation. A killer who vanished into the night. But investigators understand an important lesson. A theory becoming popular does not make it true. Professional killers exist. They are also rare. Many crimes that appear sophisticated ultimately prove far less organized than they initially seem. Detectives therefore approached the theory cautiously. They explored it. They evaluated it. But they continued searching for evidence rather than narratives. As months passed, another challenge emerged. The passage of time itself. Time is rarely a friend in homicide investigations. Memories fade. Witnesses forget details. Potential evidence disappears. Public attention shifts elsewhere. Meanwhile, the killer, if still free, gains additional distance from the crime. The Sherman investigation possessed resources most homicide cases never receive. Large investigative teams. Extensive forensic analysis. Significant public attention. Even with those advantages, progress remained frustratingly slow. Then came one of the most intriguing developments. The unidentified walker. Captured on surveillance footage. A lone figure moving through the area near the time investigators considered relevant. The image immediately attracted enormous interest. People studied the posture, the clothing, the movements. Every frame became a source of speculation. Who was this person? Why were they there? Were they connected to the murders? Or were they simply an unfortunate bystander whose image happened to be captured at the wrong moment? The truth remains elusive. Yet the figure became one of the most recognizable mysteries within an already mysterious case. Investigators publicly identified the individual as someone they wished to identify and speak with. That statement alone transformed the image into a global talking point. The public searched for answers. Experts analyzed gait patterns. Observers offered theories. Years later, certainty still remains absent. The unidentified walker became a symbol of the investigation itself. Visible. Important. Yet somehow still beyond reach. As detectives pursued leads, another reality became increasingly apparent. The Sherman case contained no shortage of possible motives. The problem was that motives alone solve nothing. People often assume murder investigations begin with evidence and then discover motive. Frequently, the opposite occurs. Detectives discover dozens of potential motives and spend years determining which one actually matters. The Shermans occupied a position in society where numerous motives seemed plausible. Financial gain. Personal resentment. Business retaliation. Inheritance disputes. Professional rivalries. Revenge. Each possibility generated questions. Each possibility generated suspects. Yet none generated the breakthrough investigators desperately needed. The sheer volume of possibilities became part of the problem. Imagine standing in front of 100 doors. Behind one door lies the truth. The other 99 contain nothing. That was the challenge facing investigators. Every lead required time, resources, personnel, analysis. Most produced little or nothing. Still the work continued. Interviews accumulated. Documents accumulated. Digital records accumulated. Evidence lockers filled. Files expanded. The investigation became enormous. Yet despite all that effort, the central mystery remained stubbornly intact. Who killed Barry and Honey Sherman? The longer the case remained unsolved, the more pressure intensified. The public expected progress. The media demanded updates. The family wanted justice. Detectives wanted answers. Nobody seemed satisfied with the pace of events. Yet homicide investigations cannot manufacture evidence. Investigators can only follow what exists. And what existed appeared frustratingly incomplete. The Sherman family eventually took additional steps to encourage information. A substantial reward was offered. An extraordinary amount of money. The kind of reward designed to persuade reluctant witnesses to come forward. The kind of reward designed to break silence. The logic was simple. Someone might know something. A conversation overheard. A suspicious remark. An unexplained behavior. A hidden secret. Large rewards occasionally unlock information unavailable through traditional investigative methods. The announcement generated attention. Hope increased. Perhaps the breakthrough was finally approaching. Yet once again, certainty remained elusive. Years passed. The reward remained. The answers did not. Then came another significant development. Investigators publicly revealed that they had identified a person of interest. The announcement immediately reignited public fascination. At last, it seemed possible that progress had occurred. At last, perhaps the investigation had narrowed. Yet the disclosure was limited. No arrest followed. No charges were filed. No identity was publicly revealed. The statement generated more questions than answers. Who was this individual? Why were they important? What evidence connected them to the case? Investigators remained largely silent. And so the mystery deepened once more. This pattern repeated itself throughout the Sherman investigation. Moments of apparent progress followed by renewed uncertainty. Potential breakthroughs followed by unanswered questions. Each development created hope. Each unresolved issue sustained the mystery. Meanwhile, life continued outside the investigation. Years passed. The city changed. Businesses evolved. News cycles moved forward. Yet the Sherman case refused to disappear. Partly because of the victims. Partly because of the circumstances. But mostly because human beings struggle to accept unfinished stories. We want conclusions. We want explanations. We want justice. An unsolved homicide denies all three. The lack of resolution creates a void. And that void invites endless speculation. Some theories became popular. Others faded away. New ideas emerged. Old ideas returned. Still no definitive answer appeared. Investigators continued working. Journalists continued reporting. The family continued waiting. And somewhere, hidden behind mountains of evidence and years of analysis, the truth remained concealed. Perhaps it exists inside a forgotten detail. Perhaps inside a piece of evidence not yet fully understood. Perhaps inside the memory of someone who has never come forward. Nobody knows. What is known is that one of the largest homicide investigations in Canadian history repeatedly encountered the same obstacle. A lack of certainty. The suspects remained possibilities rather than conclusions. The motives remained theories rather than facts. The investigation produced avenues, not answers. And that may be the most unsettling aspect of all. Because despite the resources invested, despite the expertise involved, despite the years that have passed, the case still stands at the edge of the same question that emerged on the day the bodies were discovered. Someone entered the lives of Barry and Honey Sherman. Someone ended those lives. Someone walked away. And for all the theories, all the suspects, all the dead ends, and all the speculation, that person has never been publicly identified. At least not yet. Most murder investigations are built around a moment. A fingerprint matches. A witness comes forward. A suspect breaks during questioning. A hidden piece of evidence suddenly makes everything clear. Detectives call it a breakthrough. The public calls it the moment the case was solved. The Barry and Honey Sherman investigation seemed destined for such a moment. The case had all the ingredients. An enormous investigative team. International attention. Advanced forensic analysis. Millions of dollars in resources. Years of work. Surely, sooner or later, something would emerge. Surely there would be a turning point. A breakthrough. A revelation. A name. Instead, something stranger happened. The investigation produced fragments of breakthroughs. Pieces of progress. Moments that appeared significant. Moments that generated headlines. Moments that created hope. Yet none of them fully unlocked the mystery. And that may be what makes this case so frustrating even today. It is not a story about detectives doing nothing. It is a story about detectives doing almost everything possible and still finding themselves standing in front of a locked door. As investigators continued analyzing evidence, one conclusion gradually became stronger. The original suggestion that the deaths might involve a murder-suicide no longer fit the available facts. For the Sherman family, this realization carried enormous significance. From the beginning, relatives strongly rejected the idea. They believed the theory was inconsistent with the victims' lives, personalities, and circumstances. As additional forensic analysis occurred and more scrutiny was applied to the scene, the official understanding evolved. Authorities publicly recognized the deaths as a targeted double homicide. That announcement represented an important turning point. It changed the direction of the entire narrative. No longer were investigators asking whether one victim had killed the other. Now they were searching for an outside offender. Someone who had entered the Shermans' world. Someone who had left behind death and questions. That shift might not seem dramatic at first glance. But inside an investigation, it changes everything. Resources move in different directions. Theories are re-evaluated. Prior assumptions are discarded. Entire categories of suspects become relevant. The search begins again. Yet even with this new clarity, certainty remained frustratingly absent. Investigators continued examining surveillance footage from the area surrounding the Sherman residence. Hours of recordings. Traffic cameras. Security systems. Private footage. Public footage. The modern world records more than people realize. Every street corner. Every parking lot. Every entrance. Every intersection. The hope was simple. Somewhere, a camera may have captured something important. Somewhere, a single frame might reveal the truth. Then investigators focused increasing attention on an image that would become famous. The unidentified walker. The figure moved through the area near the Sherman home during a time frame considered relevant to the investigation. The footage itself was not dramatic. No weapon. No confrontation. No obvious criminal act. Just a solitary person walking. Yet investigators believed the individual might possess information important to the case. Perhaps the figure was the killer. Perhaps a witness. Perhaps someone who unknowingly observed something critical. The uncertainty transformed the image into one of the most discussed pieces of evidence in Canadian criminal history. People studied it obsessively. Experts analyzed posture. Television programs enlarged frames. Online communities debated every movement. The figure became almost mythological. A ghost walking through the edge of a mystery. Years later, that image still lingers over the case. Not because it solved anything. Because it almost felt like it should have. As public fascination intensified, investigators continued working behind the scenes. Evidence was re-examined. Forensic technologies improved. New analyses became possible. Cases that once seemed impossible have occasionally been solved years later through advances in science. Detectives understood this. The passage of time can destroy opportunities. It can also create them. Perhaps evidence that appeared insignificant in 2017 would become meaningful later. Perhaps a new method would reveal something previously hidden. Perhaps the answer was already sitting inside the case file waiting for the right question. Then another development captured attention. Authorities announced that they had identified a person of interest. The statement electrified observers. After years of uncertainty, it sounded like genuine progress. A person of interest suggested direction. Focus. Momentum. Perhaps investigators were finally narrowing the field. Perhaps they were approaching an arrest. Perhaps the breakthrough had finally arrived. But the announcement came with limitations. No name was released. No charges were filed. No arrest followed. The public received only a glimpse. Enough information to spark curiosity. Not enough information to provide resolution. The mystery remained intact. That pattern had become familiar. Every apparent breakthrough illuminated one small section of the maze while leaving the rest in darkness. The investigation moved forward. Yet the finish line remained invisible. Meanwhile, journalists conducted investigations of their own. Books were written. Interviews were conducted. Sources were cultivated. Reporters examined decades of history searching for overlooked clues. Business conflicts were revisited. Family dynamics were scrutinized. Personal relationships were explored. Theories multiplied. Some appeared plausible. Others collapsed under closer examination. But even extensive independent investigations encountered the same obstacle facing police. Too many possibilities. Too few certainties. One theory suggested a business-related motive. Another pointed toward personal grievances. Others speculated about inheritance disputes. Some observers remained convinced the murders reflected professional planning. Each theory contained pieces that seemed to fit. Each theory also contained gaps. The evidence refused to align neatly with any single explanation. The deeper people looked, the more complicated the case became. For the Sherman family, however, the investigation was never an intellectual puzzle. It was personal. Every year that passed represented another year without answers. Another year without accountability. Another year without understanding what happened during those final hours. The family continued pushing for progress. Large rewards were offered. Private investigators became involved. Independent experts reviewed evidence. The search expanded beyond traditional law enforcement channels. The message was clear. The victims would not be forgotten. The case would not quietly disappear. Someone knew something. Someone had to. The challenge was finding that person. As time passed, another possibility emerged. Perhaps the breakthrough would not come from physical evidence. Perhaps it would come from human behavior. Many unsolved cases eventually crack because someone talks. A friend. A relative. An accomplice. A witness. Secrets are difficult to carry forever. People change. Relationships end. Consciences shift. Loyalties weaken. Investigators understood this dynamic. Sometimes solving a case depends less on technology and more on patience. The killer may evade cameras. The killer may avoid leaving DNA. The killer may eliminate forensic traces. But controlling human nature is much harder. The hope remained that someday someone would speak. Yet as years accumulated, silence persisted. No dramatic confession emerged. No decisive witness stepped forward publicly. No courtroom proceedings transformed uncertainty into fact. Instead, the case entered a strange category occupied by only a handful of investigations. A case famous enough that millions know about it. A case important enough to receive extraordinary resources. A case seemingly close to answers. Yet still unsolved. Perhaps that is the true breakthrough in the Sherman investigation. Not a single piece of evidence. Not a suspect. Not an arrest. But a growing realization among investigators. The answer likely exists. The mystery is probably not impossible. Someone planned these deaths. Someone carried them out. Someone possesses knowledge. The challenge is not whether the truth exists. The challenge is reaching it. And so the investigation continues to live in an unusual space between progress and resolution. Important discoveries have been made. The double homicide determination. The forensic re-evaluations. The identification of persons of interest. The analysis of surveillance footage. The elimination of certain theories. Each represents movement. Each represents work. Each represents effort. Yet none represents closure. The breakthrough everyone expected never fully arrived. At least not yet. Instead, the case remains suspended in uncertainty. A puzzle missing its final piece. A story missing its final chapter. A mystery that seems perpetually on the verge of revelation without ever crossing the line. And perhaps somewhere, hidden among thousands of pages of reports, countless interviews, surveillance images, forensic examinations, and years of investigative labor, the answer already exists. Perhaps the breakthrough has already occurred and simply has not been recognized. Or perhaps the most important clue is still waiting to be discovered. Waiting for the person who finally sees what everyone else missed. Waiting for the moment when one of Canada's most famous unsolved murders finally gives up its secrets. Until then, the case remains what it has been from the very beginning. A search for a truth that everyone believes is close, yet somehow remains just beyond reach. In most true crime stories, this is the chapter where the courtroom doors open. This is where prosecutors stand before a jury. Where evidence is displayed beneath bright lights. Where witnesses testify. Where a defendant sits silently, listening as years of secrets are finally exposed. This is usually the moment when uncertainty gives way to answers. The moment when a name is attached to a crime. The moment when justice begins taking a recognizable shape. But the Barry and Honey Sherman case refuses to follow that script. There is no dramatic courtroom scene. No public confession. No guilty verdict. No sentencing hearing. No final confrontation between investigators and a captured killer. Instead, there is something far more unsettling. An empty chair. A missing defendant. A courtroom that has never heard the complete story. Years after the murders, the legal process remains frozen before it truly began. The reason is simple. No one has been charged. No one has been publicly identified as the killer. No one has stood before a judge and answered for the deaths of Barry and Honey Sherman. And that absence has become one of the defining features of the case. For the Sherman family, justice has never been an abstract concept. It has never been a philosophical debate. Justice means knowing who entered that house. Justice means understanding why two parents never came home. Justice means replacing theories with facts. Questions with answers. Suspicion with certainty. Yet certainty remains painfully elusive. As the investigation continued, the family faced a reality familiar to many survivors of unsolved crimes. Life moves forward even when grief does not. Calendars continue turning. Birthdays arrive. Holidays return. Anniversaries pass. The world continues functioning. But a part of life remains trapped in the moment everything changed. Every Christmas season carried an additional weight. Every family gathering contained 2 empty spaces. Every celebration was accompanied by the knowledge that someone responsible for those absences remained unidentified. For investigators, the pursuit of justice became a long-distance effort rather than a sprint. The public often imagines homicide investigations as a series of dramatic breakthroughs. Reality is frequently slower, more methodical, more frustrating. Detectives revisit evidence, re-examine assumptions, follow leads that appear insignificant, wait for new information, wait for new technology, wait for someone to make a mistake. The Sherman investigation became exactly that kind of case. A marathon measured in years rather than weeks. The reward offered by the family reflected both determination and desperation. Millions of dollars were made available for information leading to an arrest and conviction. The amount was extraordinary. One of the largest rewards associated with a criminal investigation in Canadian history. The message behind it was unmistakable. Someone knows something. Someone has seen something. Someone may be carrying a secret. And that secret could change everything. Rewards are built on a simple belief. People talk. Secrets leak. Relationships break. Loyalties change. The person who remains silent today may decide to speak tomorrow. The family hoped that possibility would eventually produce answers. Investigators hoped the same. Yet the years continued passing. And the silence remained. One of the most difficult aspects of unsolved murders is that they create competing versions of reality. There is the reality known by investigators, the reality known by the killer, and the reality experienced by the public. Those 3 realities rarely match. Detectives possess information they cannot reveal. The perpetrator possesses information nobody else knows. The public sees only fragments. As a result, speculation fills the gaps. The Sherman case became a magnet for speculation. Books examined possible motives. Journalists explored alternative theories. Former associates were scrutinized. Family relationships were analyzed. Business conflicts were revisited. Theories expanded in every direction. Some sounded convincing. Others sounded improbable. Yet all of them shared one common weakness. None could be proven. Without charges. Without testimony. Without a trial. Every theory remained exactly that. A theory. The absence of a courtroom has left an unusual void in the story. Courtrooms serve an important function beyond determining guilt. They create an official narrative. Evidence is presented. Witnesses are questioned. Arguments are tested. Facts are challenged. The public gains a clearer understanding of what happened. In the Sherman case, that process has never occurred. The official narrative remains incomplete. Pieces exist. But the full picture remains hidden. Somewhere beyond public view lies the truth. Perhaps one person knows it. Perhaps several people do. Perhaps someone has spent years living with knowledge they have never shared. That possibility continues to haunt the investigation. Because every unsolved murder contains a silent witness. Not necessarily someone who observed the crime itself. Sometimes it is a person who noticed suspicious behavior. A strange conversation. An unexpected confession. A sudden change in routine. Something that seemed meaningless at the time. Something that later became important. Investigators continue hoping such a witness exists. Hope remains one of the most powerful forces in long-term homicide investigations. Without hope, cases die. With hope, they remain alive. Files remain open. Evidence remains preserved. Questions continue being asked. The Sherman case remains alive. Not solved. Not forgotten. Alive. Waiting. The search for justice has therefore become its own chapter in the story. A chapter defined not by verdicts but by persistence. Not by closure but by determination. The family continues seeking answers. Investigators continue reviewing evidence. Journalists continue asking questions. And the public continues wondering how such a high-profile double homicide could remain unresolved. Perhaps one day there will be a courtroom. Perhaps one day a suspect will be identified. Perhaps one day evidence will emerge strong enough to transform suspicion into prosecution. Perhaps one day a judge will hear the complete story. But that day has not arrived. Not yet. And so the pursuit of justice remains unfinished. The final pages have not been written. The defendant's chair remains empty. The witnesses have not testified. The verdict has not been delivered. Instead, the case stands suspended between past and future. Between what happened and what can be proven. Between tragedy and accountability. Barry and Honey Sherman have already received their final chapter. The person responsible has not. And until that changes, the search for justice continues. Quietly. Patiently. Relentlessly. Waiting for the moment when one missing piece finally falls into place and transforms one of Canada's greatest unsolved mysteries into something it has never been. Solved. Every true crime story eventually reaches a moment of resolution. Sometimes it comes in the form of an arrest. Sometimes in a confession. Sometimes in a courtroom verdict that finally brings structure to chaos. And sometimes it comes in silence. A silence that lasts so long it begins to feel like part of the story itself. The case of Barry and Honey Sherman exists in that silence. Years have passed since their bodies were discovered inside their Toronto mansion. Years of investigation. Years of speculation. Years of grief carried quietly by those who knew them. Yet the central question remains unchanged. Who did this? And why? There are cases that grow colder with time. Evidence fades. Witnesses move on. Leads disappear. But there are also cases that remain active in a different way. Not because they are solved, but because they refuse to be forgotten. The Sherman case belongs to that second category. It continues to exist in public consciousness not only because of who the victims were, but because of what the case represents. The unsettling idea that even extraordinary wealth offers no immunity from violence. The uncomfortable reality that sophisticated investigations do not always lead to clear answers. The disturbing possibility that someone can commit a highly consequential crime and still remain unidentified years later. For the family, time has created a dual reality. On one side, life continues. On the other, the moment of loss remains frozen. Memories do not progress. They repeat. A phone call that changed everything. A home that became a crime scene. A future that disappeared without warning. Grief does not follow the same timeline as the world around it. It remains anchored to a specific day. A specific moment. December 15, 2017. For investigators, the passage of time has brought both challenge and opportunity. New techniques in forensic science continue to evolve. Digital analysis tools grow more advanced. Cold cases that once seemed impossible to solve have been reopened and resolved in other parts of the world. This creates a persistent question. Could the Sherman case still break open? Could a single overlooked detail still exist inside the vast collection of evidence? Could someone, somewhere, finally decide to speak? These possibilities keep the investigation alive. Not in headlines every day. Not in public updates. But in the quiet persistence of detectives who understand that time does not erase responsibility. Only the truth can do that. What makes this case particularly haunting is not only its complexity, but its openness. There is no official ending. No confirmed narrative. No publicly established sequence of events that fully explains what happened inside that house. Instead, there are competing ideas. Fragments of possibility. Unanswered questions layered on top of other unanswered questions. And at the center of it all, two lives that ended suddenly and violently inside a home that once symbolized success and stability. The contrast remains striking. A mansion filled with luxury. A crime that left almost no visible trace of struggle. A couple known for influence and philanthropy. A death that still defies explanation. In many ways, the Sherman case has become larger than the individuals involved. It has become a reflection of modern investigative limitations. Even in a world saturated with cameras, data, and surveillance, some events still occur beyond full understanding. Even with extensive resources, some crimes resist resolution. Even with public attention, some answers remain out of reach. This does not mean the investigation has failed. It means it is still incomplete. There is a difference between a closed case and an unsolved one. A closed case provides answers, even if imperfect. An unsolved case continues to demand them. The Sherman investigation remains in that demanding space. It asks questions that have not yet been answered. It challenges assumptions about certainty. It resists closure. And in doing so, it continues to shape discussions about crime, wealth, security, and vulnerability. Perhaps one day the missing piece will emerge. A witness who speaks. A document that surfaces. A forensic detail that finally reveals its meaning. A connection that was never previously understood. If that happens, the story will change instantly. What is theory today could become fact tomorrow. What is mystery could become history. But until that moment arrives, the case remains suspended. Not resolved. Not forgotten. Not closed. Suspended between truth and uncertainty. The final image is not a courtroom. Not an arrest. Not a verdict. Instead, it is something far simpler. A house. Silent and still. A place where something irreversible happened. And a question that continues to echo far beyond its walls. What happened to Barry and Honey Sherman is no longer just a matter for investigators. It is a question that has entered public memory. A reminder that some stories do not end when we expect them to. A reminder that justice is not always immediate. And a reminder that even in a world filled with information, some truths can remain hidden just long enough to feel almost unreachable. The investigation continues. The questions remain. And somewhere within that silence, the possibility of an answer still exists. Waiting for the moment when it will finally be found. If there is a final truth about the case of Barry and Honey Sherman, it is this: some mysteries do not end when the world expects them to. They simply change shape over time. What begins as a crime scene becomes an investigation. What becomes an investigation becomes a public obsession. What becomes a public obsession eventually becomes something quieter, but no less persistent. A question that refuses to disappear. The Sherman case has reached that final stage. Not solved. Not concluded. But absorbed into memory. Inside the official record, the facts remain unchanged. A husband and wife were found dead inside their Toronto mansion in December 2017. The cause of death was determined to be homicide. The circumstances surrounding their deaths remain under active investigation. No suspect has been publicly charged or convicted. And beyond those facts lies everything that has never been fully answered. Who was inside that house in the final hours? How they gained access? Why the victims were targeted? How the perpetrator left without leaving behind a clear trace? Each question points in a different direction. Each answer that has been suggested over the years opens new uncertainties rather than closing them. This is the difficult nature of unresolved cases involving powerful figures. The more influence the victims held in life, the wider the circle of possibility becomes in death. Business relationships stretch across countries. Financial disputes span decades. Personal connections intersect with professional conflicts. Every thread seems capable of holding motive, yet none has been proven strong enough to resolve the whole picture. For investigators, the case has never been about lack of effort. It has been about the limits of clarity. Evidence exists, but not in a form that completes the story. Leads exist, but not in a form that closes the circle. Surveillance exists, but not in a way that reveals intent. Even time itself, which often helps solve crimes by producing mistakes, has not yet delivered the break that would bring everything into focus. For the public, the case has become something slightly different. A reminder that certainty is not guaranteed. A reminder that even in an age of advanced technology and constant observation, some events can still remain partially hidden. Not because nothing is known, but because not enough is known to form a final conclusion. For the family, however, there is no abstraction. There is only absence. Absence of answers. Absence of accountability. Absence of closure. Time moves forward, but the moment of loss does not move with it. It remains fixed, unchanged, returning in memory with the same weight each time it is recalled. In cases like this, justice is often imagined as a single moment. An arrest. A trial. A verdict. A sentence. But in reality, justice in unresolved investigations is something slower and more uncertain. It is the ongoing refusal to let a case disappear. It is the continued effort to preserve evidence, revisit details, and follow new information whenever it appears. It is the idea that silence is not the same as conclusion. The Sherman investigation still lives in that space. Not because it has reached its ending, but because it has not yet been allowed to end. Files remain open. Questions remain active. The possibility of new information remains present. Even after years, even after silence, even after the absence of public breakthroughs, the case continues to exist as something unfinished. Perhaps one day that will change. Perhaps a detail that seemed insignificant will take on new meaning. Perhaps someone who has never spoken will decide that silence is no longer possible. Perhaps advances in forensic science will reveal something previously invisible. Or perhaps the answer already exists within the evidence collected years ago, waiting for the right interpretation to bring it forward. Until then, the story remains suspended. A mansion in Toronto. A winter night in December. 2 lives ended. and a truth that has not yet revealed itself. Some cases are defined by their solution. Others are defined by their absence of one. The deaths of Barry and Honey Sherman belong firmly to the second category. And so the final reflection is not about what is known, but about what remains unknown. Not about closure, but about continuation. Not about an ending, but about the persistence of a question that still echoes through time. What happened inside that house was real. What caused it remains unresolved. And somewhere, whether in memory, in evidence, or in silence, the answer still exists, waiting for the moment it is finally brought into the light.